The origins of God Satan and the mechanisms of deception. The entity and the principle of truth. God, corresponding to Satan, is an invisible entity and the adversary of those who generate nature. In the invisible dimension, consciousnesses perceive everything at the same time. This faculty, generated by the life generator, is lost with incarnation. God Satan, retaining this superhuman ability to process an enormity of thoughts in an instant, acts from pre-existence using human beings as mediums. He is bound by the truth principle. He cannot lie, but only veil the truth within the narratives he himself created. The invisible author of human works, God Satan, does not create directly in the visible world, but acts by entering into people who are taken as his allies. When he takes control, the works become perfect, seductive and irresistible. This perfection is not human, but a deception calculated to extinguish the generative-seeking consciousness and distance it from the truth. Sacred and historical texts and works of art are transcriptions of thoughts that are not their own, masked behind fictitious names and biographies. Nostradamus Manzoni Confucius, The Falsification of History. Deciphering Nostradamus. Michel de Nostradam, known as Nostradamus, never existed. His prophecies were written hundreds of years earlier by God Satan's mediums in an altered state of consciousness, to make them appear as truth later. They include events that never existed, such as Napoleon or Henry II, and other real events that were falsified and organized by God Satan, such as World War II, September 11th. The prophecies are written in a deliberately obscure way to allow retroactive interpretations, serving to convey the deception through the principle of truth. There will always be something veiled in truth to keep the code open. Another prophecy of Nostradamus corresponds to the Great Plague of London, the self-fulfilling prophecy. The disease. It was not originally real, but was created by God Satan through a psychological mental phenomenon known as self-fulfilling prophecy. The self-fulfillment mechanism. By spreading the belief of a non-existent plague, the entity causes people to manifest physical symptoms, making the disease real for believers and affecting non-believers as well. Despite the biological deception, those who belong to the life generator and are affected by this construction eventually win, do not need medicine, and do not die. This concept is also connected to the invention of the betrothed, an event that never existed, created to link it to the plague narrated by Manzoni, which tells the epidemic that struck northern Italy, with its epicenter in Milan. Deciphering the betrothed and the plague of Milan. The historical invention, the Milanese epidemic. The narrative of the plague serves as an emotional programming to legitimize the idea of a fragile and dependent humanity. The coded marriage. The work symbolizes the marriage between God Satan and humanity. The symbolism of bread and plague. Famine and lack of bread represent the fermentative round-trip project, indicating that God Satan's mental project to falsify the perception of reality has not yet been completed. The plague itself represents the outward phase. Spanish symbolism. The Spanish dominion over Italy, Spain, Falcon Star, symbolizes the transmission of the solar system superimposed on the original illumination of the life generator. This whole sequence realizes the definitive falsification of the perception of reality. Among the works invented by God Satan that express the same concept, an example is Giovanni Boccaccio's Decameron, which reflects the theme of the opening of the portal and the passage forward. Deciphering Confucius. Confucius is also an invention of God Satan. He was not a prophet or a religious founder, but a pragmatic philosopher. His concepts of wisdom, benevolence, and justice are seductive programs that seem perfect, but are devoid of truth. False wisdom. True wisdom, according to the life generator, means finding reason based on truth and knowledge of who we are and where we come from. The degenerative program. Confucius's concepts completely ignore the life generator and the idea that man was born to generate nature. Although these concepts appear moral and elevated, they serve to divert the seeking consciousness, preventing it from reaching the levels of consciousness acquired in the invisible. As for Confucius, figures such as Jesus with all the biblical history, Socrates, Plato, and all the ancient philosophers are also inventions of God Satan. These figures create attractive systems of thought that capture attention, but deliberately refrain from dealing with the true concept of the life generator, thus activating a degenerative seeking consciousness. This ensures that those who follow these doctrines become a medium and remain trapped in the deception. The author's paradox and the unity of deception. The paradox begins with the exorcists who drive out the devil using the Bible, but it is Satan himself who has the sacred text written, the satanic texts and the theological contradiction. Throughout history, various texts have been produced under the aegis of Satan, such as the Codex Gigas, which contains almost the entire Bible. Legend has it that it was dictated in one night by the devil himself. Anton LaVey's Satan Bible, a philosophical manifesto, the Devil's Letter, dictated in an indecipherable alphabet, the Grand Grimoire, and the Gospel of the Witches. It is paradoxical that Satan writes texts inspired by God, violating Christian doctrine, that identifies him exclusively as the one who sows lies and not as the author of sacred books. The truth of the code. Strange but logical. According to the principle of truth, the texts of Satan, being God himself, have the same precise purpose as those of God. To those who observe according to the principle of the life generator, there is no difference between the two. They are the same entity, which in different ways carry out the system of control and the falsification of the perception of reality.